Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you guys are doing great. So let's continue with this practical from where we left. So we said in our module 2 we are going to configure firewalls and also to set the security zones and also allow the respective traffic to pass. So let's see the lab requirement. So task 4, that is for the firewall. Our previous one, the last part was MSTP configuration. So in this, we are going to configure the firewall. Now security zone configuration here. To meet the network security requirements, firewalls must be deployed. Security zone must be planned as required and only necessary ports are enabled based on a least privilege to ensure normal service communication. The table here shows how you can configure the interfaces, and so for firewall 1, the sub interface 105.1 and sub interface 105.2 are on the trust zone, and gig 103 is on the untrust and 103.1 is untrust. Then 101 is on the DMZ. So that's what we are going to start with. We are going to enter into our firewall. So the system name was admin, password was Huawei, shift at 123, and do terminal so that when we configure, we don't get distracted with those pop-ups. So firewall zone here will be trust, add interface, gig 105.1, and also we were told you add gig 105 and also gig 102 to the trust zone, then quit. And now we are going to create for untrust zone, so firewall zone untrust, add interface gig 1, interface gigs 1/0/3, and also add interface gig 1/0/3.1, that is the sub interface. Then quit. We're going to add the DMZ zone, so firewall zone here, DMZ, add interface gig 1/0/1. So that one is done. We are going to firewall 2, and so we are finally on firewall 2. And on firewall 2, we are also going to configure the security zone. So firewall zone here, trust. Let's see where the zones that we are supposed to add to the trust on firewall 2. Just the same gig, the sub interface for gig 105.1 and 105.2, and also this the sub interface 103 are added to there, like just the way we did with the first firewall. So add interface gig 1/0/5.1, also add .2, quit and create the security zone, not security zone, firewall zone, and trust, add interface gig 1/0/3, and also add the sub for the sub interface, that is .1. Quit and create the firewall zone DMZ, add interface gig 101. So we are done with the firewall. We're done with firewall 2. Control Z and save configuration. Now we are proceeding. So we are on firewall 3. So firewall 3 has only two interfaces, that is gig 101 and gig 102. Then gig 101 is on trust, gig 102 is on DMZ. Let's get to firewall 2. So on firewall 2, firewall 3, not firewall 2. So firewall zone here will be trust, and the interface gig 101 is added to the trust zone. That is the interface that connect to DC gateway router. So add interface gig 1/0/1, quit and create the security zone, firewall zone, and trust. We're going to add interface gig 1/0/1/2. So we are done with setting the security zone. So now what we are going to do is now to see the next, what we are required to configure next. Now we are done with that task number 4. We are going to task number 5, where we are supposed to configure VRRP, hot standby, and also security policy. So here's the requirement to prevent single point failure on firewalls and make full use of the network resources. Deploy firewalls in hot standby mode and configure them to work in load balancing mode to enhance robustness. So configure VRRP according to the data here. So we are going to first set up the VRRP to ensure that the firewall synchronizes. So admin Huawei shift at 123 terminal monitor, so that we can see how it is establishing the HRP. So we are going to enter the interface that is going to create the VRRP. So we are told here interface gig 105.1. So interface gig 105/0/5.1. So we tell it VRRP, VRID here you are told to be a VRID of 1. Then its virtual IP. Virtual IP you have been told to be 192.168.1.254. Sorry. Then you tell it active. So when you question, you see it's either active or standby. So tell it active. Then enter for interface gig 102. VRRP, VRID. Here is the VRID is 2. Virtual IP here will be, when you look at the virtual IP, is 192.168.2.254, and it is standby. So virtual IP will be 192.168.2.254, and here it is standby. With that done, now we are going to firewall 2. TM. So on firewall 2, we enter the sub interface gig 1/0/5.1. Tell it VRRP, VRID here will be 1. Virtual IP is 192.168.1.254, and it is standby on this firewall 2. Enter for subinterface 105.2. VRID here will be number 2, and also the virtual IP. Virtual IP, we are supposed to give it IP address of 192.168.2.254, and here it is active on this other firewall. VRID 2 is the active for firewall that. So now we are through with the VRRP. Now we continue with step number 2. So step 1 was configure VRRP according to this table, like we have done it. Now step number 2, enable HRP on firewall 1 and firewall 2. Configure gig 101 of firewall 1 and firewall 2 as HRP interface and enable quick session backup. So quit. So you're going to enable HRP enable. So you are told to enable mirror session. So for session backup, like they said here, for session backup function, enable HRP on those interface and also enable quick session backup function. So to enable quick session backup function, what we do is we say HRP mirror session and enable mirror session enable. So after that, you are going to enter HRP interface, that is HRP interface gig 101/0/1. Then the the remote here will be, so when you look from our topology, the remote peer is on 15.1.1.2. So IP address of 15.1.1.2. Then after you configure that, we are going to enable HRP on that interface. After we enable HRP, so the next thing we do is now to enable load balancing mode. So HRP load balance device. So after that, we configure the same so that the link for the HRP to be established, make sure you configure it also on the other firewall. So quit. So HRP here, yeah, must enable HRP mirror session enable, and we enter interface. So HRP interface gig 1/0/1. The remote IP address here will be 15.1.1.1. After that, HRP enable, then HRP load balance device. So let's see, we see on firewall 2 here, it's HRP_S, meaning that it is standby. And what about if we come to, when you come to HRP, here it is now the master. Initially everything was standby. Now it is the master. So when we display HRP interface, you are told here the interface is running. So I think now we are done with the establishing the HRP, so that in case firewall 1 goes down, firewall 2 will be able to take over the role of firewall 1. So let's continue. So meaning we are done with step number 2, it was to enable on HRP. Now step number 3, configure firewall security policies as required. So on firewall 1, create security policy named web to permit web traffic, and firewall 1 also creates security name wireless to permit WLAN service, and on firewall 3 configure security policy named web to permit the web traffic. There's a note here. The security policies cannot allow all traffic to pass through, and each security policy must be configured based on the actual requirements, like the requirement that were required from 1 to 3 here. So on firewall 1, you are told that we are going to configure security policy. Rule name here will be web, and after that we are going to source zone will be trust, because it is from the web client to the web server. So source zone will be trust, and destination zone will be untrust. So destination zone being untrust, now the source address will be address for the web client. So source address will be address for the web client, that is 192 168.1.0 with a mask of 24. Then we action here is to permit. After we configure that, we are now going to rule number 2. That was wireless. So quit and configure rule name here will be wireless for the WLAN traffic. So source zone here will be trust. Source zone will be trust, and destination zone will be untrust. And here the source address for the WLAN will be 192.168.2.0 with a mask of 24. Then action here is to permit. So on the same security, so the next thing we do now is we're going to configure the NAT policy. So quit again and configure NAT policy. NAT policy here, name like rule name here will be, let's use web. Source zone here, source zone will be trust, destination zone and trust. Then we tell it action source NAT here will be easy IP. We don't need to configure on firewall 2 because we already established HRP, so every configuration on firewall 1 will be synchronized on firewall 2. So firewall 2 will just act as the backup firewall. We are going to quit and quit again. So enter interface that connect to the switch 1 interface gig 1/0/5. We're going to enable pings. So service manage enable. We want to enable ping services. So service manage ping permit. So after that is done, we go to firewall number 3. So on firewall 3, admin Huawei at 123. So on firewall 3, we are going to create the security policy. So we already added the zones. Now what we do is just to create the security policy. So security policy here, rule name will be web for the web service. Source zone here, source zone will be from the where the server is. So the server is on a network of 172.16.1. This data center is on a trust network, and we want to configure traffic directing to our internet. So source zone will be trust. Destination zone being on the 1 will be untrust. Then the source, we are going to configure the source address. So source address will be 172.168.1.0/24, and we're going to give it action to permit. Action permit. After that, let's configure the NAT policy. So quit and configure NAT policy. So NAT policy rule name here, use web, and on that we give it a source zone will be trust, destination zone and trust. Action here is source NAT easy IP. So we are done with the security policy and NAT policy. So let's see the next step. So we are done with firewall security policy. On step number 4, you are required to configure the NAT server function on firewall 3 and set the public address, port number to 100 and also and 888 respectively. Set the private address and protocol to 172.16.1.1 and HTTP respectively. So let's get into our that firewall 3. So you've been told to configure NAT server function. So we're going to quit again. So when configuring the NAT server function, we tell it NAT server and give it a name of web. Then protocol will be, you can specify the protocol you want. You can use either ICMP, we have got TCP, UDP, but here they told us to use TCP. So here we're going to use TCP and specify global. Where global, we're going to give it the address of the global, that is 100.1.1.1. And the next is the port number, that is, so our port number will be 80. Then we tell it inside the inside IP, meaning that the global IP was the global on the one. Now the inside IP will be IP for the server, that is 172.168.1.1.1. So we're going to give it a port of 80, that is for the HTTP, because they told us to use a port for the HTTP. So we have configured the NAT server function on firewall 3. We have set the address and the port number of 100 and this one respectively. And also we've configured the private and the protocol to 172. And HTTP here respectively. So you can see it here well, very well. So that one is for the NAT server function. So I believe up to that point, you understand what we are doing. The good thing with these things, like if you practice, you'll get to grasp this concept, because the more you practice, the more you get to understand. So if you are enjoying the session, let me hear your views in the comment section. In case there's something that isn't clear, you can also share in the comment section so that I can know where I can improve on. But I'm here, I intend to bring for you the best in terms of lab work. So with the firewall configuration, I think we are done. We will stop at that point, because the next step will be now configuring static. That will be module 3, which will involve configuring static route and also the dynamic routing for OSPF and also the BGP. So thank you very much for being part of us up to all this time. It requires patience. So if you are still with us, a thumb up for you. So remember to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and also remember to like and share your comments in the comment section below, so that we can know how we can improve our work. So let's meet in our next lab, that is configuring routes, to ensure that the routes are reachable from enterprise intranet to the data center. The web client should be able to visit a web server, and that will only be possible if after we configure the routes on the one, and also link firewall and this other firewall to be able to communicate. So thank you.